Hey, discerning listeners, Jorge and Anfisa, let's watch.
Believe me, I started to realize that I need to protect myself. So I set up a meeting with the lawyers by myself because I felt like there was a lot of restriction having her in the room. So I had to lie to her. I told her I was gonna get something out of the garage, and I didn't go back inside the house.
All right, so he says that he's going to go talk with a lawyer about a post-nuptial agreement and that he wanted to go alone, but he felt like he couldn't go alone because she wouldn't let him, I think, or something along those lines. And so he lied to her. He said he was going to the garage, and then he just disappeared. So one, that's a lie and a deception and a massive trust violation and very disrespectful on a whole number of levels. So there's that. Also, I think that it's an indication that he has been dealing with a lot of abuse and intimidation or something. I mean, if you just heard from a friend that they wanted to do something on their own and they didn't really want to talk with their spouse about it and they felt like they had to lie to their spouse in order to just get out of the house, you would be concerned for that person. Now, I don't know how many people care about George or think that he's a victim or something, but I don't know. I mean, if I told you, if a friend came to you and said, my partner has hit me multiple times, has keyed my car in rage because they were upset at me, has demanded I give them money, has broken into my phone and erased it and my computer because I didn't do what they were wanting me to do. I mean, what would you say to that, right? So, you know, I don't know how he seems to be taking it pretty well. He doesn't seem to be presenting as someone that is that doesn't feel safe, but usually victims don't present that way. I don't know, though. It's hard for me to gauge how he's really taking it. Her behavior is not okay. His behavior is not okay either. He's lying to her just flat out. There's other ways of going about it. Plus, I think if he were to go to her and say, look, I love you, I'm with you, but I need to run an errand, and frankly, I guess I'm going to talk to a lawyer, not because I want to divorce you, because I want to be, I think if he did a lot more reassurance to her, or even just brought her along, I mean, what's the big deal?
That's her. Hello?
Where are you? I told you I was hungry.
Okay, I'll get you some food right now. I'm about to pull over. Right.
All right. And again, if you were sitting next to your friend, I mean, the reason why I have to put it in other people's terms, to say if this was your friend, is because I think a lot of people hate George. And so it's hard to evaluate the behavior based on that bias, I think. And, maybe it changes things given who George is, but I think it's useful to think about what's going on here. So if you were sitting next to your friend in a car and your friend's partner did something like this, called and then was like, where are you? I'm hungry. When are you going? You would say something or think something. I don't know what, but I don't know what to say. It's notable, I guess. And if I were to make some sort of hypothesis, I would say that, again, her abandonment trauma is being triggered. Now, he didn't help by lying to her, of course, so that would trigger anyone, but there's a lot of different ways one could respond, right? And then the tone of voice, the whining. If you just heard this voice, you would assume that was his daughter, honestly, right?
That's her. Hello?
Where are you? I told you I was hungry.
Okay, I'll get you some food right now. I'm about to pull over.
Now, maybe he abandoned her when she was hungry and she has no way of getting food on her own, which would be a legit gripe, right? But it's against the tone of voice and it's the pattern, right? And I've seen this before, that when you have a pursuer and you have a distancer, we can use this as a jumping off point, and the distancer will start to lie or deceive or avoid, which isn't cool for them to do, but they're doing it because of the pursuing, and they're both causing each other. And the more they avoid, the more pursuing. I think Ariella and Binningham, for example, is just a classic example of that. I don't know if that's what's happening with them, but they present that way, and there's been multiple instances and multiple data to point in that direction. So there's so many other ways of dealing with it. Like I said, for her, she could go to therapy. Well, really, what would help is if she were to recover from, I think, her abandonment trauma. And if he, I don't know, it's always harder to gauge people like him because, say he was with someone who wasn't like her, he might actually do fairly well in that relationship and have some issues with his behaviors, but it wouldn't be at the level of conflict that they have. There's also a possibility that his shadiness and his avoidance would trigger anyone, but with Anfisa, it's particularly triggering given her history and her traumas. But with anyone, even a securely attached person, they would be upset, but it would be mitigated by the security in the partner. So it's harder to gauge with people like this. And I've treated couples like this where her behavior is so much easier to see because they wear their heart on their sleeve. For the Georges of the world, sometimes it takes me months to really zero in on, because the other thing is, for the avoidant people in therapy, they tend not to talk about their feelings. They might not even know their feelings. And so they seem really chill. They seem like, well, I'm just trying to, make do. And I don't know, I'm trying to help out my partner, but, they overreact a lot. So I don't know. And it's harder to get at what's going on. Whereas if they did wear their heart on their sleeve, they would be much more forthcoming with feelings of hurt or being claustrophobic or feeling like they can't trust their partner, a lot more pain, a lot more sadness. And so I don't know if that's what we're seeing here. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that he has a lot of attachment and security that is harder to detect because of this reason?
Right now, that's just an attention thing, I feel like. When she just calls and this and that, I feel like it's dealing with a kid.
Okay, so he says, I think it's an attention thing. I think I'm dealing with a kid. I get the kid label because it's certainly toned that way. But the attention part of it is, again, he said that before, and that's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is that she has massive abandonment trauma, and you absolutely triggered her by lying to her and ditching her and literally abandoning her at home when she has no way of getting around or getting along in the world, and she's hungry. And so, yeah.
I'm pulling over.
Why did you leave? Tell me you're gonna come back.
Well, what do you want?
Right, you hear that pain. I just feel so bad for her. It's interesting, and I've said this before, that when she knows the cameras are there, because there's a possibility she doesn't know the cameras are with him right now. Or at the very least, it's not as in her face, and thus she doesn't internalize it much. Because, when she's in front of the camera and she's doing an interview, or the two of them are there and the cameras are there, she has that mode of toughness and stoicism, and she has that smirk in her face, and she's, I think it's because of her shame, she puts on a persona that she learned probably when she was a young child, maybe even a teenager. That's the way she comes across, is like a teenager who is really trying to cover up their vulnerability by seeming like they don't care about anything. And then we hear, I think, the real her on the phone, and we saw a little bit of it last time when she actually started to cry on camera, but I think that was boiling over for her, and it was hard for her to manage at that moment. But anyway, so on the phone we start to hear, I think, what she is like behind the scenes, what he's really dealing with, and what her emotions are really like, and how her reactivity is. And so she is, obviously distressed. She's not trying to control him in this moment. She's just like, what did you do then? Let's rewind that, because I feel like I want people to really feel, and let me know if you do, the pain that she's going through. It doesn't justify a lot of her behavior, but the problems that they're experiencing and the problems in a lot of relationships has to do with what's happening for her, our past issues getting triggered, and how our defenses and ways of trying to manage it will actually cause our partners to trigger us more. She pursues in the way that she does, and protests about attachment loss in the way that she does, which is there's a variety of different approaches. A lot of it is controlling and abusive to him, and then he either feels righteous in being able to abandon her because he's just like, well, screw her, that kind of attitude, which isn't good, or he's terrified, so he has to sneak around. Again, going back to Ariella and Biniam, when he would work out or be with his friends, he would turn off his phone, I think, on purpose and claim that his phone ran out of battery. And he, in his mind, might think, well, I'm justified in doing this because she calls me like 15 times a day. I'm not doing anything. And I'm sad that she left to the States. I begged her not to leave, but she did. And so I'm trying to pass the time because I'm terrified I'm going to lose everything. And plus my child is going to go through surgery in the United States. I'm not there. So I'm just trying to pass time. I'm with my friends and we're working on things. I'm trying to actually get a career going, get some money. And she's calling me 15 times every hour, telling me that I'm a terrible husband. I don't want to deal with that. So screw her. I'm going to turn off the phone. Now, a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Use the link below or use the promo code Kirk because that really helps us out. You know how I always say take care of yourself at the end of every episode? Well, part of taking care of yourself is taking care of your mind, taking care of your needs. To get our needs met, we must first know our needs. And to know our needs, we got to explore our needs. And even if you feel pretty good about that kind of thing, there's nothing like having someone who cares about you provide you with the concentrated time to really explore what you need and how you feel. Well, that's where therapy comes in, of course. And as you often hear me saying, BetterHelp can be a really convenient option for getting therapy. Also, online therapy has been empirically demonstrated to be just as effective as in-person therapy. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Kirk. That's betterhelp.com/Kirk. Take care of yourself and get the therapy that you deserve.
I'm pulling over.
Why did you leave? Tell me you're gonna come back.
Well,
Yeah, you hear the pain in her voice. I think that is critical because understanding that, I think, is understanding her and understanding where she's coming from and understanding their dynamic. And I've been saying this over and over and over again that the main narrative or hypothesis that I have heard from people who have watched this, or at least the most vocal one, is that she is just in it for the money, and she stated that up front, and so he's a jerk face because he lied to her about not having money, and that's why they're fighting all the time. But I think when we hear stuff like this, at least for me, that conceptualization might be part of it, but I think not as much as what's happening here, that she has massive abandonment traumas, and he very obviously does ungood things to trigger her.
hello?
You told me you were gonna come back to the apartment. Did you see this?
What's the problem?
You were going out and you're coming back.
Now, again, she has a legit gripe here. She has a legit complaint. But I think we're hearing the emotionality and the trauma emerging, right? So, yeah, I just feel really bad for her, honestly. And I've felt bad for her ever since I started to detect this. So I don't know if I'm seeing it right, but... And by the way, if people are out there who are counselors or who are going to become a counselor of some sort, the thing that I have found that I will try to help my trainees with is there will be times when you will have trouble having empathy for one of your clients, particularly difficult ones, people who present in a very tough manner, abusive people. And when we see people the way that culture has taught us to see them, then we tend not to have any empathy, because the way in which we've been taught to see someone like Anfisa or George is through contempt. And it's hard to have empathy for someone that we have contempt for. So when I actually, prior to even having hard data or good data to go from, I will try to imagine what might be going on underneath everything. And it's I often will hypothesize that it has to do with something that I've been talking about with her. With him, I guess I would imagine that he feels very insecure. I think I detected that in the very first episode when he was having all those misogynistic ideas about feminism and that kind of thing. That's usually what's happening. I've treated a lot of people like that. I talked about that. I've treated incels. I've treated MGTOW people, pickup artist people. They are always massively insecure and have been rejected extensively in their life. and feel very sad, but they have no roadmap to managing that, and so they transform it into anger and judgment. And there are pockets on the internet that will support all their misogynistic ideas, that support them, telling them that it's not their fault, it's feminism fault. Anyway, so you got to find a proper woman from another country or something like that. And I also think what's happening for him is something from his childhood. I don't know. I mean, it's so typical for me to say, but I'll just say that, in that he presents as very accommodating in a way that isn't very honest, because when he's in front of her, he's like, okay, whatever you want. But then clearly he has a lot of anger and is upset at her and doesn't like her and doesn't like her behavior because he just flat out lies to her. So a sort of a shadiness, I suppose. Like, if I imagine that if he were involved with anyone and there was a conflict that would come up, he would avoid and then do something passive aggressive, like, I'm going to the garage, and then just disappear. So what would be underneath all that? Well, a lot of insecurity, a lot of pain. And when I see that, when I hypothesize that prior to any data, it provokes empathy for me. I actually will have empathy for people that I didn't have otherwise, because I wasn't seeing them accurately. And usually when I gather more data, something along the lines of what I'm hypothesizing will come to fruition, and I'll have a lot of data. I had that with Anfisa, I think. Well, I don't want to say that. Did I? I hope I did. I hope that I think I did. Yeah, I think I remember when the beginning of the whole journey that Anfisa's behavior was so, I don't know, just so out of the ordinary that she was just flat out like, I'm only in it for the money, DDD. I think I hypothesized, like, there's got to be something else going on there. And I do that because I will notice myself going with the cultural notion of contempt for people, which prevents me from having empathy for them and frankly prevents me from seeing people accurately.
Well, what is the problem?
But yeah, let's rewind this and hear this whole exchange, because I don't know what she suffers from. I don't know her issues. I don't know if she suffers from anything. But people with borderline, people with very high preoccupied attachment, maybe even people with disorganized attachment, with a lot of abandonment trauma, betrayal trauma, when they are triggered, which obviously this would trigger anyone, would upset anybody, just flat out lying and didn't just ditching someone, then the pain is very severe for people who have those abandonment traumas, and then they decompensate emotionally. Honestly, if I had heard this exchange, I would be very concerned for her safety, honestly. So let's rewind this.
She knows I'm up to something. Hello?
What? You told me you're gonna come back to the apartment and you see this.
What's the problem?
You were going out and you're coming back.
Well,
Stop me!
what is the problem?
You're gonna get back and tell me, hey, I need to go, but you did.
You would think if you were him, you'd feel bad. And you'd think you would say, I'm sorry, or something. Now, maybe contempt has worked its way into his heart for her. There's been a lot of things, the king of the car hitting him, abusing him. So who knows? But you'd think there would be some compassion there. I mean, she's obviously suffering greatly. But you hear it in her voice, right? This isn't someone who's just in it for the money, right?
What are you doing?
So the thing to think about is, where is this coming from, and what sort of age would we imagine this person being? And what I hear is a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old child screaming, "Don't leave me, come back." That's what I hear. And it just breaks your heart to think that she must have gone through something like that. I don't know, but I'm just guessing that she has, and that's what's being triggered, and that's the part of her that's expressing itself.
Do you need to go back and we cancel this? What do you do?
Yeah. This is the kind of I have to go through all the time. I could already tell she's already thinking of doing something stupid. Well, I can't get Uber. I can't.
Yeah, I wish if the producers would say, "Hey, bud, just go home." Like, just let's not. There are things on this show when we think, okay, well, they're fighting and they're having a a moment, and it's on television, and that's why we're filming, and it's going to help us with our ratings. But at there's a certain point where you're crossing a line, you're just like, no, this isn't okay. Like, we need to shut it down. Dude, you got to go home, or we can't be here filming because this is exploitative. And she is in a bad way. She is suffering greatly in my estimation. This isn't just like when, for example, Jasmine was suffering greatly and going after Gino. There was a different tone to it. Jasmine seemed... I didn't worry about Jasmine's safety. I was concerned for Jasmine's emotions and her, I don't know, how she was doing. But Jasmine, I think, although a similar hypothesis regarding traumas and relational traumas, I think for Jasmine, it's not as severe and not as young, I think, and not as unhealed. So I think for Jasmine, when she was really yelling at Gino and grabs the hat and all that stuff, I was like, well, I see where she's coming from, and I think she's triggered, and this is how she's expressing herself. But I didn't feel like it was crossing that line, whatever that line is, in terms of going into, this is exploitation, this is not okay. This, however, is different. This feels different to me. Does it to you?
Oh my God. What is the problem? I am coming back.
You lied to me.
I am coming back now.
Yeah. And it's hard to visualize because we've never seen that side of her, or very rarely, right? It's hard to visualize her screaming like that. But we have to imagine, just the unbridled yelling and screaming now into the phone. Yeah, it's rough. And I also have, like I said, a lot of questions as to whether or not she even knows the cameras are there, which would also be uncool. I'm sure they sign a thing that says, look, anything that happens is free game, and we don't necessarily have to inform you. If we're with your partner and you call your partner, we don't necessarily have to inform you about that. So just know that. Now, but I don't know, maybe she knows the cameras are there. If she doesn't, then at the very least, George should tell her. By the way, the cameras are here, just so you know, because I just don't think she would be doing this if she knew the cameras were there.
I decided to cancel and go back to Anfisa because she was just acting crazy. So today I was going to talk to the lawyers about transferring my assets, so I do have a layer of protection, but I'm not even getting a chance to do that.
Good. I'm glad he's going back for a number of reasons. But then he says why I thought he was just going to consult about getting a post-nup where they would both sign it, but he's saying that he was going to move assets to protect himself or something, which I don't even know if that's legal, but who knows. I mean, that'd be like if I were to, sock away money in a secret account so that my wife didn't know about it. I don't know that's not okay. Like, what are you doing? And the more and more I hear about his tendencies, the more shadiness I hear, the more kind of, I don't know, I've talked about this a little bit, just sort of disregard for common morality, I guess. It's just, and he doesn't seem to be fazed by it. He's like, yeah, I was going to hide money away from her anyway, going back home. I think other cast members on the show either wouldn't do that or wouldn't say it or wouldn't be so cavalier about it, right?
I don't know what would cause anybody to flip out like this. It just gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. I did something I wasn't supposed to do, but I just don't get it.
Right, so this demonstrates what I was saying earlier, which is that I don't think Anfisa would be okay with the cameras witnessing what she was going through. And because if she was okay earlier when George was on the phone and in the car and whatnot and going to the lawyer, and if Anfisa knew that the cameras were there and was demonstrating all that emotionality and that style of communication, if she knew the cameras were there and was okay with that, then obviously she would be okay with the cameras coming in the apartment, or at least in all likelihood. But the fact she's like, oh, the cameras are with you? No, I don't want the cameras in here. I think is a tick in the column that she didn't know the cameras were there, which is extremely uncool of George and also uncool of the production team. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.